My daughter-in-law tilted her flute and let cold champagne slide down my collar because I wouldn't cover their lavish bill. I didn't shout. I folded my napkin, met my son's eyes, and felt 66 years of backbone hold. I asked for separate checks paid for what I ordered and went home to decide quietly and firmly what would carry my name from now on. That moment at the table was only the spark. What followed was paper policy and a single word said at the right time that changed everything. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I got there early, the kind of early that lets a woman breathe before the room tells her who to be. River Oaks shimmered under valet lights. The hostess smiled like a photograph. Jazz curled above crystal and the steakhouse windows made halos out of headlights. I chose a corner banquette and set a wrapped bouquet on the empty chair beside me. Nothing expensive. Market lilies and brown paper, a courtesy for the couple. I smoothed the napkin on my lap, heard the clink of glass, and reminded myself of my quiet intention. A simple dinner where I would be their mother, not their wallet. Now. Here. Darlie arrived camera-ready, a glossy tide of perfume, and promise sweeping our table before she even sat. 2 friends drifted in her wake, bright as storefronts. Damien followed with the smile he uses when he is trying to make 3 people happy at once. The hostess reset silver. Phones came out like place cards. "We'll order for you, it's easier." Darlie said a breezy correction that landed like a paper cut. I let it float past. I have taught budgets to seniors and soothed anxious freshmen. I can outlast a tone. I read the menu anyway, measuring salt and price and respect, and held my stillness like a glass. Their laughter rose at the specials. I answered with a nod and a patient smile. Okay, a friend leaned toward Darlie's stage. Whisper perfectly calibrated to carry. "Mom's paying tonight, right?" The words snagged in the air, not question so much as cue. Phones lifted. Someone said, "Get this." And I watched tiny red lights bloom like berries. They wanted a clip, an easy story, generous, elder, glossy couple bubbles and applause. I lifted my water instead of champagne's steady hand-level eyes. Years of audits teach you where to look. I noted timestamps on screens, faces in reflections, angles in the glass. Damien glanced at me, hopeful and anxious. I met his gaze and stayed still, inviting him to breathe. The server waited. I let the pause reveal who needed the scene more. Truly. Add-ons began to land like glitter. Someone couldn't stop shaking. Tasting flights, the chef insisted on a caviar bump for the real, a prestige bottle with a label that photographs well. Damien tried small jokes that didn't stick. Darlie's friends narrated the night as if followers were guests at the table. I kept my attention on the server who was doing quiet math in her head, balancing grace against chaos. When she reached me, I thanked her for her patience and slipped a tip early, low, and discreet. Respect is a language. The room brightened for their cameras. I held my own light, close, the plain kind that doesn't burn. I asked about trout and coffee. She nodded, grateful to be seen. The leather check presenter arrived with a hush, the way a curtain falls. Darlie pivoted it toward me with the kind of ease that only comes from practice. "We'll let you do the honors," she said brightly, and her friends lifted their phones as if to crown a tradition I had never agreed to. A small, deliberate silence followed. Even the jazz seemed to wait. I set my hand lightly on the folder, then slid it toward the edge of my plate and looked at the server. "Please separate the checks," I said, voice low even. "I'll cover what I ordered." I did not make a speech. I did not apologize for my boundaries. I let the room feel the uncomplicated sentence, and I breathed while the cameras hovered hungry for a different ending. The server nodded surprised and reached for a pen without argument. Damien tried a half-smile, the family peacekeeper caught between cameras and a mother who refused a script. I saw the old reflex in him, the urge to solve a problem with his face. I have spent decades absorbing costs so he could be young a little longer. I have paid bills, invisibly made dinners appear, turned storms into forecasts. Tonight, I let the weather be weather. He cleared his throat. "Mom," he began, then thought better and reached for water. I could feel embarrassment pulling at him like a tide. He is a good man who hates a scene. I decided not to rescue anyone from the price of their choices. That, too, is love at our age. I kept my tone gentle when I spoke to the server again, steadying the edges of the moment without erasing them. I let ordinary hold us breath in, breath out. I straightened the little bouquet on the empty chair, a small ceremony for my own patience. I would not beg for a seat I had already earned. Old habits surfaced like tide lines. I noted the time on my phone, filed the minute in my head beside the date, and the total I expected for my meal. The server came back, careful eyes, asking questions she did not voice. I nodded, polite, unmoved. This was housekeeping, not warfare. Boundaries are simply furniture, put back where they belong. I adjusted my posture and met my son's eyes without heat. Whatever came next, I would not perform or plead. Steady. Darlie raised her flute again, smile bright enough to cast shadows. She leaned toward me so the cameras could read her lips. "Don't be difficult tonight," she murmured, sweet as a sticker with a warning underneath. I folded my napkin once, set it neatly on my lap, and cleared a tidy space between my glass and the edge of the table. The room hummed with performance, but in the small circle of air I kept, there was only breath and bone and choice. Her bracelet chimed against the stem. Champagne beaded the rim. I did not move. I watched the bubble crest and let myself grow very quiet, very present. Her wrist tilted with the precision of a practiced flourish, the flute's rim catching the pendant lights like a tiny moon. Around us, phones hovered lenses, bright as insects circling sugar. Someone whispered, 3 and 2, turning a dinner into a countdown. I centered my breathing so quietly I could hear the napkin's faint rasp as I folded it once more. The room pressed in, hushed and hungry. Damien's eyes searched my face for a cue. I gave him the same one I've given him since he was small, steady now. I did not reach for theater or rescue. I let the moment arrive on its own feet without chasing it or shrinking from it. The champagne came cold and fast, a bright arc that broke across my cheekbone and ran under my collar like a winter river. A laugh snapped in the air, then tumbled into gasps as the stem chimed against the plate. The server stopped mid-step, one hand flying to her mouth. Damien opened his closed. It opened again, as if he could wind the tape backward by sheer will. I did not give them a second flinch. I took the linen blotted once where the liquid pooled and kept my shoulders square. No rubbing, no scene, no apology. Bubbles fizzed in the lace at my throat. I watched them disappear. The jazz did not miss a beat. Neither did I. I lifted my water, the plain glass suddenly far more beautiful to me than any flute, and spoke low. "I'll pay for what I ordered." Darlie's smile tightened, the kind you see on billboards that bend in the wind. "It's not a good look to split in front of our friends," she said, angling her body to keep the camera's sightline clean. I met Damien's eyes, and he saw the answer before I said it. This wasn't a fight. It was a boundary. I have taught hundreds of kids the difference between a wish and a line item. Tonight I was reminding my own. A woman can be kind and still keep her ledger honest, especially when the room prefers make-believe. I turned to the server and asked for itemized checks, clear and simple. "I'm sorry for the interruption," I added, "and thank you for the help." I did not apologize for my decision. I read the figures when they came, the way a pianist touches keys. Familiar, precise. Trout coffee tax. I tipped for the trouble and for the way she had held herself upright when other people forgot how. Leather folders slid and shuffled. Someone muttered, seriously, as if the word could erase arithmetic. I signed with a hand that has steadied budgets and children in equal measure. When I was finished, I placed the pen down as if it were a period. A friend chirped, it was a joke turning her phone to hunt for a softer angle, where water looked like sparkle, and surprise looked like gratitude. Darlie laughed on cue. The sound had edges. I did not correct their script. I have learned not to donate oxygen to fires that feed themselves. Let me handle, Damien started, but stopped when he saw the signed slip, facing up exactly where it needed to be. He breathed out through his nose a slow release, and I watched some young part of him give way to a steadier shape. You can love people without performing for them. You can be present without being used. I stood. The chair's legs whispered against the floor, softer than the hush that fell. I thanked the server first, then the manager who had drifted near, but wisely kept his hands in his pockets. I picked up my small bouquet, the paper darker now, where droplets had kissed it, and held it like the quiet gift it was meant to be. As I passed my son, I rested my hand on his shoulder for the length of one heartbeat. The gesture said what words would only bruise stand up straight. Then I walked toward the main door. No side hallways, no back exit. My name can meet the front light. Outside, the night air was cooler than the champagne drying on my blouse. Valet lights blinked like steady beacons, cars looping in their reliable choreography. I checked the time, because that is what I do when lines are crossed. Dates and minutes anchor truth when memory gets edited by embarrassment. I considered what could be washed and what ought to be left alone. The blouse would rinse clean. The scene would stand where I left it. I breathed until my heartbeat matched the crickets. The city kept moving. So did I. My car eased forward. As I tipped the valet, my phone pulsed one small blink from the banking app, then another as if a lighthouse were signaling from a familiar shore. Not here. Not under streetlights with perfume still in the air. At home, under a kind cone of kitchen light with paper and a pen, and my own table, I would open the numbers and let them speak. Boundary first records, second. After that, whatever must follow will. I hang my damp blouse by the sink switch on the cone of warm kitchen light and sit at my oak table with water and a notepad. The house is quiet in a way that lets facts speak. I set my phone down screen face down and breathe once before I begin. Tonight I do not relive last night. I record what it cost and what it revealed. The air smells faintly of lemon oil and soap, ordinary mercies after spectacle. I smooth the notepad's first page, date the corner, and write the word ledger. I align the glass to the right, the pen above the pad, and make the room honest by naming what happened and what will happen next. Numbers first, then meaning. I open the banking app and tap accounts. My primary card appears, and beneath it a smaller line. Authorized users, Damien. Darley added 2 years ago for emergencies. The word emergency looks thin beside a scroll of designer purchases, winery deposits, tasting menus with paired flights. I widen the dates and watch the list thicken the way a bruise spreads after impact. I capture the user page as a screenshot. The tiny key icon next to their names feels heavier than it looks, like something handed over lightly that took weight from me all year. I remember saying, yes, Damien, between jobs, Darley called it logistics. Told myself trust was love with guardrails, and the rails were only pretty. I filter by category: dining, bar, travel, retail, luxury. The dining bar grows tallest a skyline of weekends. I mark dates and add notes in the memo field: not present, not asked, gift claimed as theirs. Weekend away our anniversary. I request paper statements for 12 months because paper is stubborn and unmoved by spin. On the merchant map, little pins cluster along celebratory hours. Fridays at 8, Saturdays at 7:45. I set the phone down, write totals in ink, and underline the word pattern. The numbers do not argue with me. They do not explain or flatter. They sit there until someone decides who pays. I circle the dates that carry name and draw an arrow toward tomorrow. In the early months, my notes beside charges read temporary and will fix. By summer, the notes thin. The spending does not. A red banner pops up: recurring luxury merchant detected. I star that line. Emergencies do not recur on Saturdays. I remember morning I added them Damien between jobs. Darley, persuasive about timing and rides and receipts. I believed that access could behave like help. Looking now, help looks like a costume worn to a party where I paid at the door. I scroll month by month and see the drift from exception to habit, from gratitude texts to silence. The graph climbs like someone training tolerance. I click export and let numbers leave phone where excuses turn shy. Now. In the kitchen drawer, I find the pen I gave Damien at his college graduation engraved with my initials. I remembered telling him, "Make your own signature." I set the pen beside the folder and feel the ache of love that stays even when trust must be reworked. I am still his mother. Tonight, that means drawing a line he can lean on later, even if he dislikes where it stands. I uncap it and sign the statements request with slow letters, not because the bank requires ink, but because my hands do. The scratch on paper steadies me like a metronome. I cap the pen, then write a sentence I will keep no more on my name. I don't brandish it. I keep it as an anchor love that holds without dragging. I slide it back into the drawer care promise intact. On the notepad, I make a checklist remove authorized users, request closure notice for the auxiliary line, set alerts, print cardholder responsibility rules. I open the credit union app and book a morning slot Avery at 10 Upper Kirby branch. Under that, I write the sentence I will carry in no more on my name. My handwriting is slower than it used to be, but decisive gets there even when fast does not. I gather last year's tax binder and the paper statements request. I place everything in a clean folder so the bank sees order, not apology. I rehearse the greeting, the sentence, silence after the sentence. If asked why, now I'll say, "Now I looked." If pressed, I'll repeat it and pause. I wait. I imagine the first text, "You embarrassed us." I draft a reply I do not send. I will not discuss feelings over money until access is corrected. I practice tone out loud the way I practice budget hearings, low, even brief. I set my phone face down again. Tonight is for facts, not debates. A hush settles over the house that feels like permission, not exile. When fear tries to bargain, I open the folder and read the top line aloud. No more on my name. That sentence is a room I can step into and lock behind me until morning. I stack the mail, turn off hall light, and leave the kitchen orderly. I rinse the blouse and pin it near window to dry. I line up the pen, the notepad, and a clean folder on the table the way I do before tax season. The app icon glows once more, then sleeps. I do the same lights off, one by one down the hall. Morning will not be an argument. It will be signatures and removals, a sentence spoken once then honored. I set an alarm for 8:30, place my bag by the door, and leave the kitchen as if a small office had just closed for the night. In bed, the ceiling fan thrum sounds like a train that keeps time without moving me anywhere. I picture the lobby at Upper Kirby Glass Plants, the quiet of people minding their money. I picture a quick click, a slip. Live oaks dapple the lot with green shade as I pull into a space outside the credit union. The folder rides in the passenger seat like quiet company edges, squared tabs peeking like small flags. I smooth my skirt, feel the old calm of Monday paperwork settle into my shoulders and carry the folder inside. The lobby smells like toner and coffee. A neat sign glows member services above a tidy counter. A host greets me by name and checks me in for 10. I take a seat where I can see the clock in the door. I am here to make a clean change, not a scene. Paper over noise, light over heat. My phone stays face down in my bag. I do not need a chorus for this. Avery appears on time, a navy tie and an easy neutral tone. "Good morning, Ms. Keene." "Water." I nod. In a small glass office, he wakes up my profile on a flat screen and waits. I set down the folder, stack the statements request on top, and place the engraved pen across it like a bridge. I breathe once and give him the one sentence I practiced under my kitchen light. I need to remove 2 authorized users from my card and close any auxiliary line attached to my name. No apology, no narrative. Boundary, first task, second. He clicks a few fields, confirms the last 4, and says, "We can take care of that." The sound of "can" steadies the room. "Before we proceed," he says, turning the monitor slightly, a quick review of how this works. He prints a cardholder responsibility statement and runs a highlighter across a quiet paragraph. Authorized users can spend, but they're not owners. They can't obligate you to pay for their charges, and once you remove them, they can't restore access. Only the primary account holder controls the line. He taps another screen. We can also enable merchant category alerts and require your approval for any online card not present transaction. I nod. This is language I speak clean as a budget line authority scope control. 2 names sit under authorized users like small anchors on a blue screen. My hand hesitates for a half heartbeat, then finds its weight. Ready, Avery asks. Yes. Click, click. The names vanish. He prints a removal confirmation and slides it across with a pen I do not use. There's also an auxiliary line linked to the same profile he adds. Close it, I say. Please issue an account closure notice. He types, asks me to initial in 3 spots, and stamps the page with today's date and time. Somewhere outside, a phone rings. Somewhere inside me, something stops ringing. The work is precise and brief, like stitches that hold. We move to the perimeter. Let's add spending alerts, I say. Daily summary at 6 p.m. travel locks on by default notifications for new merchants. He nods and builds the fence. I request mailed statements for the last 12 months and a fresh card with my single name. If harassment starts, Avery says gently, a credit freeze with the bureaus is sensible. I write it down but keep my voice even. I expect messages, I tell him. I don't answer until records are in order. He doesn't ask for the story behind the sentence. He doesn't need it to do the job. His eyes fall to the pen. That's a nice weight, he says almost to himself. Graduation gift for my son, I answer. It's doing its job today. We don't trade histories. We trade signatures. It's kinder that way. I initial where the yellow flags ask sign where the lines expect print my name, once the way I taught 1,000 students to print theirs clear, legible, accountable. The ache that sits beneath my sternum doesn't leave. It loosens. This is not punishment. This is governance. Love remains. Access changes. The printer hums out a small stack account closure notice. Authorized user removal confirmation cardholder statement, alert settings, replacement card order. I check names, dates, reference numbers, routing codes. The habit that kept a school district solvent keeps me upright now. I slide every page into the folder beside the pen, square the corners, and breathe. My name looks whole again on paper. No slashes, no shared permissions, no polite fictions that emptied the drawer. Avery hands me a card sleeve, stamped temp, and a receipt for the morning's work. Anything else today, he asks. No, I say. That was the work. Sun catches the glass as I step back outside. Heat reaches up from the pavement, honest and uncomplicated. My phone buzzes once, then again, then again. I let it do what it will while I unlock the car and set the folder on the passenger seat. I rest my palm on it for a breath, the way you steady a cake in the back seat after driving slow. Messages can wait. Boundaries go first. Records follow. Then, if needed, words. I check my mirrors ease into traffic beneath the live oaks and point myself home. The drive is familiar Kirby to Westheimer left at the light patience at the 4-way, where no one remembers who arrived first. I keep the radio off so I can hear my own cadence. At a red light, my screen blooms with previews I don't open. We need to talk. Call me now. Are you serious? I angle the phone face down again and picture my kitchen table under clean light. The folder will open. The pages will stack. The plan will hold. Whatever storm waits in the messages will have to meet me on paper. At my driveway, I cut the engine and sit for a count of 5. The oak throws shade across the hood. The day hums with ordinary birds and distant lawn tools. I lift the folder, feel its simple weight, and go inside. The house smells like coffee and wood polish, steady as a pulse. I place the documents on the table and lay the pen across them just so. Then, and only then, do I turn the phone over and let the screen wake to its chorus. Hailstones stack in the notification tray. I make tea. The file is open. I am ready to read. The phone started before the kettle clicked off. 1 banner, then 3, then a stack that climbed like sleet against glass. Call me now. You embarrassed us. Fix what you did at the bank. Each preview tugged me back toward that dining room. I slid the folder toward me and uncapped my old graduation pen. The page took today's date and the first time stamp. I said it out loud to the empty kitchen so there would be no mistaking it. Later, I don't answer. while facts are being sorted. The kettle cooled. I didn't. I sorted by sender, not by volume. Damien's texts came in short bursts like someone breathing between doors. "Mom, can we talk? This looks bad. Please call." Darlie's were long and lacquered fit for an audience. You created a scene you promised that card was, "Forever family, doesn't itemize." A few of her friends chimed in with clapping hands and a link preview of a splash video. I did not tap. I took screenshots and labeled each thread by hand D1 through D6, Day 1 through Day 10 Friends Misc. Then I exported a single PDF of the texts and saved it to a clean folder on my desktop, no commentary and no reply. A storyline revealed itself without my help. In their telling, I had broken an oath, humiliated them at a venue that knows their names, and betrayed the code that says mothers pick up what children order. I underlined each claim in blue and wrote one clear sentence beside it. Authorized user owner. I paid for what I ordered. Records attached. I do not argue with phones. I speak once in person with paper. The room felt steadier each time I chose ink, over impulse breath, over reply posture, over performance. A voicemail badge appeared from a River Oaks exchange. I set the phone between the folder and the pen and pressed play on speaker. The manager's voice was careful, practiced, and not unkind. There had been an attempt to dispute part of last weekend's bill on the basis that mother-in-law agreed to cover it. Policy required cardholder authorization for any chargeback, absent that the account holder for the remaining check was responsible. She said she could email an invoice copy for my records and noted the couple had been informed. I saved the voicemail file to my folder, named it with the date, and added Lacey River Oaks to my notes. The dining room became a small office. I printed the invoice when it arrived, its line items tidy and unembarrassed by the truth. I stapled it behind the account closure notice from the credit union and slid both into the folder's first pocket. I added a line to the contents page 3, voicemail transcript 4, invoice copy. The pen's weight was steady under my fingers. I remembered budgets balanced in louder rooms and felt something gentle settle. This work I could still do. Online, the chorus tried to reframe what happened. It was a joke a friend captioned under a looping boomerang of raised glasses. Darlie posted a story in soft light. Some people use money to control. A mutual acquaintance forwarded it with a shrug emoji. I chose not to interpret. I did not correct their script. When Damien texted, "Can we talk?" Not on text, I offered Friday at 3 the corner coffee on 19th 2 seats by the window if they were open. He replied, "Okay, no phones." I answered agreed. I printed the text exports and slid them into place. I added a simple index at the front so anyone could follow 1 bank removals, 2 closure notice 3, voicemail 4, invoice 5 texts. I wrote each section title as if I were labeling shelves in a pantry. I placed the pen across the top of the stack, tools, not weapons. The printer quieted and the kitchen returned to itself. I rinsed a cup, let it dry, and sat back down to breathe until my shoulders remembered how. By late afternoon, the phone still trembled every few minutes. I flipped it face down and let it buzz against wood until the battery asked for help. I made a simple dinner and left a clean blouse on a hanger for Friday. When the charger clicked in, the screen bloomed with speech I did not need. I set an alarm for the meeting and a second one to remind me to breathe before I walked in. The folder sat beside me, warm with the order I'd given it. Thursday brought quiet weather. A couple of stragglers arrived from numbers I didn't know. I filed them. I swept, watered the rosemary, and reread the invoice. Everything lined up. The lie was not creative. It was lazy. I closed the folder and rested my palm on the cover for a full breath. At 3 on Friday, I would sit across from my son and ask one question that could not be texted, typed, or dressed for an audience. There is a comfort in writing the truth down. It is heavier than gossip, easier than outrage. I rinsed the champagne blouse again and hung it near the sink, where clean light finds everything. The stain had lifted. The memory would not, and it did not have to. Some things you keep to remember why you drew a line. The phone vibrated once more. I turned it to silent and let the house hold its own quiet. Before bed, I placed the folder in my tote with the pen and a simple spiral notebook. I wrote the single sentence I would use if voices rose. Do you want your mother or her card? I underlined it once, then turned off the kitchen light. Friday would come exactly on time, and I would meet it with paper not pleading. The corner table had a window that laid a clean stripe of light across the wood. I chose it on purpose wall at my back view of the door. 2 mugs waited on the table. I folded one napkin into a neat blade and set it between us like a small treaty. When Damien slipped in 10 minutes late, he wore the face of a boy who had run to catch the bus and missed it anyway. He reached for a hug, then stopped. We both sat. I asked you here to make one choice clear, I said. His hands cupped the mug. He started with the restaurant, the audience, the feeling the room had watched him fail at adulthood. I lifted my palm once to set the pace. This isn't about a dinner, I said. It's about whether you want your mother or her card. He blinked, then looked down at the dark grounds on the saucer. I never asked you for money, he said. You offered. Yanking access like that makes me look dependent. The words were practiced, but the hurt underneath was not. I let the sentence land and did not chase it. You can want comfort, I said. You cannot have it from my name. He dragged a breath, lifted his eyes, and tried a different angle. I want both, he blurted, as if he could snatch the syllables back while they were still warm. The truth of it flushed his cheeks. He rubbed a thumb along his cup, trying to polish the moment cleaner. I slid the folder between us. I had thinned it before I left home. No commentary, no history. Only the 2 pages that mattered. On top lay the removal confirmation from the credit union, the clause highlighted that said, an authorized user is a guest on the account, not a co-owner. Beneath it sat a 1-page summary with my name, my limits, my alerts. Black type, white paper. Authorized user isn't ownership, I said. If you need help, you ask me. You don't take my name to the bar. He scanned the page jaw set. His phone buzzed. He turned it over with the guilty reflex of a student. The screen offered him a tidy box, a wine shop delivery awaiting approval. He tapped lazily. A second banner slid in immediately after plain and cold payment declined. The red text glowed between our hands. For a heartbeat, he stared the air in him, going quiet. The barista called a name, and the room moved on. Damien's mouth thinned. You did this to humiliate me, he said, voice low, sharp enough to cut. No, I said, and let the quiet work. I did this to stop being humiliated. We held the difference like a level the bubble settling center. He looked at the window. We were going to pay you back, he said finally. Darley says the optics of splitting checks with family are terrible. It makes us look honest, I said. The word surprised me with its softness. It makes you look honest. His shoulders sagged. I took a card from the inside pocket of my purse and set it on the table. It was cream with Navy-type Shannon's name, and under it an appointment time penciled for Tuesday afternoon. Reality budget. I had scheduled it and could cancel it with one call. The choice would be his. If you want help standing up, I told him I'll stand next to you. If you want me to carry you, I won't. He touched the card with 2 fingers, then tucked it into his wallet with a care that told me he might use it. Darley won't like this, he said. I expect she won't, I said. You can tell her I won't discuss feelings over money until access is corrected. That's my line. I sipped my coffee. It had cooled to the point where bitterness shows if you aren't paying attention. His phone buzzed again. He silenced it without looking. What if I hate admitting I needed the help? He asked softer. What if every time you helped, I heard a bell that said I was failing? Then this might be a mercy, I said. No more bells. We sat with that. The door chime counted people in and out. Behind the counter, a timer beeped and someone said, "Got it." Ordinary and fixable, a good combination. I watched my son pick at the corner of the folder and thought about the day I bought the pen to go with it, the day I told him, "Use this to sign your life." He cleared his throat once. "I'll talk to her," he said. "No more group dinners for a while." "That seems smart," I said. His face eased by a degree. He reached for his mug and found it empty. We smiled at the small comedy. My phone lit with a preview from an unknown number. I didn't reach for it, but the words were big enough to read, "I was at your table last weekend. I think you should see this." The subject line landed like a pebble on still water ripples moving out to edges I couldn't see yet. Mom Damien said. "Just a message," I answered. "I'll look later." I pushed my chair back. He did the same. We gathered our coats and whatever else we had carried. At the door, I rested a palm on his shoulder for the length of one breath. He stood a little straighter. I let my hand fall. "Stand up straight," I said, not as an order, but as a blessing. He nodded. "I can do that." We walked into the brightness of late afternoon. The world carried on exactly as if we had done something unremarkable, and in a way we had. We had told the truth with our feet on the floor. We had chosen daylight once. We'd let a door close without kicking it. In the car, I set the folder on the passenger seat and pressed my palm against it to keep it from sliding. The phone in my bag hummed. At the next red light, I would open the message, not for drama, for the record. Evening poured a thin amber stripe across my kitchen table. The house held its breath after a week of messages. An unfamiliar subject line blinked. "Before the splash," what she said to her friends. I checked the address, hovered over the links, and opened it on my laptop. Old finance habit, look, verify, document, then feel. My rule tonight matched the one I'd kept since the restaurant See Save Not Share. The first clip loaded with a soft click. Our table sat in the frame from the next booth. The picture wobbled, but the sound came in crisp. Darlie's voice lifted over the jazz-relax mom's paying. She always does. Laughter followed like silverware chiming out of time. In the glass wall, I saw the server approach and Darlie's hand tilt upward, a quiet signal for the prestige bottle. The timestamp put it 15 minutes before the champagne hit my face. Intent recorded. I let the bar creep across the screen without touching it. A second file icon waited later in the night, but first I replayed the lead-up. This time I caught another line, a hushed stage direction. "Make sure you get her face." The camera panned, and there I was, hands folded water glass before me, eyes on my son. Darlie leaned in and barely above the music, breathed, "Don't be difficult." It wasn't a request, it was a cue. I clicked the second file. The moment arrived without drama from me. The flute tilted. Cold, bright liquid jumped the rim and broke along my cheekbone and blouse. Gasps, a short shriek from someone who loves spectacle, and then the scramble to call it a joke. On the audio, my voice sounded like a level held to a wall. "Separate the checks, please." No shake, no rise. The camera didn't stay for the exit. It didn't need to. It had kept what mattered, the setup, the spill, the script. I saved both files to a new folder, then to the external drive I keep for taxes and life. I wrote the time sender and file names on a sticky and pressed it to the tab. I ran a checksum and printed a one-page confirmation. After years of closing school books down to the penny, I trust paper over adrenaline. A reply blinked open as I typed. I asked the sender for a first name and a public place to meet. She proposed a coffee near the Texas Medical Center between shifts. A woman with steady eyes sat across from me. "I'm Zara," she said. "I hate bullying dressed up as celebration. I thought you might need this in the right hands." We airdropped the originals. I asked for permission to use them if a neutral third party required context. "Use my first name only," she said. "No social media." I thanked her. We talked about the weather the way spring here can't decide between soft air and sudden downpour, and then we went back to our lives. I filed the email for record. At home, I treated the dining room like an office again. The laptop sat open beside the folder. The external drive blinked. Once, then rested. I exported the files with their creation metadata. Intact, burned a copy to an encrypted thumb drive and printed 3 still frames. Darlie's signal to the server, the whisper near my ear, the tilt no one could mistake for clumsiness. On a fresh page, I wrote a short summary, date, time, location, what the camera captured, what the audio made plain. Nouns and verbs only. I slid the prints behind the restaurant invoice and the bank notices and labeled the tab Context, Pre-Incident, and Incident. The engraved pen went on top of the stack. It was never a sword. It was ballast. When my hand closed around it, the tremor that had started at my wrist eased. I could be his mother and still say no. I could love my son without underwriting a performance. I drafted an email to Maureen, a mediator a retired colleague recommended. I request a neutral session to set financial boundaries with my adult son and his spouse, I wrote. I didn't attach the video. Evidence should arrive clean, not warmed by an inbox. I proposed Monday afternoon downtown under a sign that promised confidentiality. I rehearsed my one-sentence aim. I'm here to separate family from finances and to keep my name mine. The house settled as I made tea. The ache that had followed me all week didn't flare. It sat down and grew quiet in the presence of order. On the folder, I added one more sticky, "Do not circulate." Not to cousins, not to friends, not to win anything on the internet. Restraint is part of the record, too. I washed the blouse from the restaurant by hand and hung it near the back door where the evening light could do its slow work. The champagne smell had faded to something almost sweet, like an old party I'd left early. I smiled at that. Leaving early can be another way of arriving on time. On Sunday, I pressed send on the scheduling note and waited for the ping that would put a date on the calendar. I set my phone face down and opened a paperback I've read 3 times. The words didn't have to be new to be useful. They only had to be honest. When the confirmation chimed, I placed the phone on the folder and let the sound finish before I looked. Monday at 2, downtown. I closed the laptop, turned off the cone of kitchen light, and stood a moment in the doorway. The video would sleep in its paper sleeve. I would sleep in my bed. In the morning, I'd wake and do what I've always done when a budget runs hot, cool it, with numbers and with one clear word, when someone asks for what they can no longer have. Maureen's mediation services sat 12 floors over the hard glitter of downtown Houston. I arrived early, not to pace, but to smooth the papers in my folder and let my breathing find a quiet metronome. The receptionist offered water. I took it and chose a chair where the window light hit the wall, not my face. At 2 o'clock, sharp, a door opened. Maura Maureen asked crisp as a ledger line. Her room was designed to keep temperature, even a round wood table, a glass carafe, a small box of tissues nobody planned to touch. Damien and Darlie sat together bright and tight. Our nods were acknowledgments, not greetings. Maureen set ground rules in a voice made for fire drills, one person at a time, speak in I statements, decisions in writing, no recording. I placed my folder and my engraved pen in front of me. I was here to speak once plainly and then sign. Maureen asked for opening statements. Darlie went first, posture immaculate. It was a misunderstanding, she said. She overreacted. We felt shamed in front of friends. Damien added softer. We just wanted one night without money talk. I kept my eyes on Maureen. I was not here to relitigate a dinner. I was here to separate family from finance and keep my name with me. When it was my turn, I slid one page across the table. The top half read, Authorized User Removal Confirmation. Beneath it, Account Closure Notice. Under that 2 simple lines I had typed at my kitchen table, I will not finance adults' lifestyle. Respect requires boundaries. I did not mention champagne. I did not mention videos. Maureen scanned the page, then asked, State your request. Recognize and respect the closure I said. No more charges in my name and no attempts to route bills to me. Darlie leaned in. She promised the card was for family. Maureen looked at me. Is there documentation of any promise? I opened the folder to the clause Avery had highlighted at the credit union authorized users are not owners. Access rests with the account holder. Removal is final. Only then did I lay down 2 still frames with timestamps, one 15 minutes before the spill, one during. No adjectives, only the clock. The room took a breath and kept it. Maureen turned to them. Your ask? Darlie said temporary reinstatement until we stabilize. Damien cleared his throat. A transition period would help. Maureen faced me again. Would you consider a limited restoration with controls? I set my forefinger on the pen that once rode in my son's graduation pocket and prepared the shortest answer I have ever needed. No. The word landed like a level on a shelf. I added one sentence: I will help my son directly if he asks me, not through open access to my name. Maureen wrote as if she had written the same result 1,000 times. Access remains closed. Parties agree to cease any attempt to dispute charges in Maura's name. Darley's jaw clicked. Damien stared at the carafe as if the water could offer him a different math. We moved to conduct. No social media commentary about family disputes. No messages about money outside scheduled discussion. Respectful in-person communication only if any. We initialed each paragraph. I signed with the engraved pen, its weight familiar, its purpose clarified. Darley's signature was quick and hard as slash. Damien's was shaky but stayed on the line. The form was scanned and emailed to all before the caps were replaced. We stood. In the hall, Darley murmured, "This isn't over." I met her eyes. "It is on my accounts." She looked past me to the elevators, hunting for an angle that did not exist in this building. Damien said nothing, only pressed his lips together and slid his hands into empty pockets. Maureen handed me a sealed envelope with certified copies. If the public story continues, she said, send a brief correction, not an argument. Back home, the apartment felt steadier than the high-rise. I placed the memorandum behind the bank notices, then opened a blank email and let it draft itself under my cursor. One factual sentence addressed to the restaurant manager, and if needed to anyone who had asked me privately about Saturday night for clarity, I paid my own bill. I did not authorize or agree to pay others' charges. Access to my account has been closed and remains closed. I saved it as a template, not a broadcast. Tools, not weapons. I set the pen on the folder and closed the cabinet where I keep important papers. The house was quiet in the way that lets choices echo only once. Somewhere across town there would be phones, posts, and secondhand versions. They could hum without me. The agreement was signed. The boundary was live. If more was needed, it would be written, not performed. I turned the kettle on and watched it do its simple, honest work. Heat meeting, water, meeting boil. I set the mediation memorandum on my kitchen table and laid my engraved pen across the top like a small brass paperweight. Afternoon light softened the grain in the oak, the kettle ticked, and the house let my breath lengthen. No speeches, no reliving. Today would be paper, not performance. I would correct the record, once hold to what we signed, and let silence do the heavy lifting. My phone chimed. Darley's story had returned. Money should connect families, not control them over a blurred photo from the restaurant flutes, lifted like proof. A cousin forwarded it with "What happened?" I typed nothing. I opened the folder instead and read the lines Maureen had typed while we watched Access closed. No social commentary, contact about money only in scheduled channels. The rules we agreed to before lunch were already bending before dinner. I pulled my chair in and opened a new email to Darley and Damien. CC Maureen. Subject, respecting today's agreement. I kept it to one paragraph and the temperature low. I acknowledged the session, cited the paragraph about public posts, and requested the story be removed within 24 hours. I attached the signed memorandum. No scolding, no history. I read it aloud, listened for heat, then pressed send. Words are like salt. You can always add, but you can't take away. Politeness can be firm. I drafted a one-page courtesy notice to accompany the email. Please cease and desist from public statements regarding my finances or character. This request is made pursuant to the agreement executed today. Non-compliance may require further steps. I exported it as a PDF, printed a hard copy, and set it beside the memorandum to cool, like a pie on a rack. Paper has a way of arriving even when phones pretend not to see. Replies stacked before the printer, finished. Damien wrote, "I'll handle it." Darley sent 3 paragraphs about narrative's family image and how I misunderstood the meaning of generosity. I forwarded both to Maureen with no comment and archived the thread. Then I muted Darlie's account for 30 days. Boundaries are easier to keep when the room is quieter. I poured tea and opened a fresh document titled Family Money Communication Policy Draft. 3 lines, nothing fancy. 1. I do not discuss money by text or on social media. 2. Any aid, if offered, is direct, time-limited, and documented. 3. Violations pause all conversations for 2 weeks. I saved the file but did not send it. Some policies work best by existing. You don't wave them like flags, you let them sit patient and visible like a traffic sign that prevents what you don't want to happen. I sent a short thank you to Lacey, the restaurant manager, for her voicemail the other day and requested a written confirmation that my portion of the bill was paid on the night of the incident. She replied within the hour with a scanned invoice and a polite line. Your payment was completed in full. I slid the printout behind the account closure notice, checked the date stamps, and wrote received in the margin with the old steady hand that once kept a school budget balanced through rough years. By late afternoon, the tea had gone cool. The house exhaled, and I addressed an envelope to Darlie and Damien. I printed the courtesy notice again, signed it with the heavy pen, and walked it to the neighborhood post office. The clerk weighed, the paper clicked a tiny scale, and offered certified mail with return receipt. I paid, watched the green sticker applied, and tucked the tracking number into my wallet. Outside, the air smelled like sun-warmed asphalt and crepe myrtle. I thought of every budget meeting I survived by being patient with paper, by letting numbers cool hot rooms. People forget, but paper remembers. Back home, I added the postal receipt to the folder and labeled the day's section Mediation Compliance. The phone buzzed on the counter, then again, like a moth at a lamp. I turned it face down and let the screen cool. The memorandum lay where I had left it, square and quiet. I drew a thin line under the last note in the contents page and closed the folder. I washed my blouse and hung it by the sink, watching bubbles lift champagne from the collar. It wasn't about stains. It was a message to my nerves. The night was over, the fabric would be clean, and my name was mine again. I checked the tracking number, snapped a photo, then taped a small square inside the folder. I added a contents line, certified mail, courtesy notice, and underlined the date. Maureen's confirmation arrived with red receipts in the footer. I filed it and wrote one more unsent note. If silence is challenged, use the policy. I set that slip on top of the draft so it would be the first thing I saw the next time my phone tried to turn, feeling into urgency. At the kitchen window, the street was ordinary, a jogger, a neighbor with a dog, a truck easing past the oaks. I let my shoulders settle and practiced the line I'd use if cornered. I don't discuss money in public spaces. Then the quieter one, I wish you well. 2 days from now, the paper would do what it always does. It would arrive where it was sent. And other paper I did not draft would find my son by a different route, the kind of envelope that persuades when opinion won't. Consequences aren't punishments. They are explanations written in ink. I rinsed the cup, set it in the rack, and turned off the kitchen light. Wednesday was a clean page. I reconciled my checkbook at the kitchen table, penciling small ticks, while the basil leaned into the light. The certified receipt from Monday rested beneath a mug. Paper steadied me. Mail slid through the slot. 2 envelopes wore my name. A third, forwarded from Damien's old address, carried his hurried blue ink. I put the kettle on and sorted by postmark. Systems speak in dates before dollars. The top envelope hawked a credit card I did not need. The second was a grocery circular. The forwarded one was a pale sleeve with a window that made my stomach tighten. Past due. The banner read in polite red. Inside the leasing office explained an autopay failure for last month's rent fees now accruing. The memo listed a card ending in my 4 digits. I texted Damien one line. You have a notice from your leasing office. Bring it when we meet. No scolding. I set the letter on my folder and wrote today's date in the corner. Then I shut the kettle off before it whistled. Boiling invites panic. I chose quiet. On Thursday, we walked into the Montrose leasing office together. Miss Ortiz met us at a desk. Behind her policies sat in a neat frame. Damien began, There's been a misunderstanding with my mother's bank, the old reflex to lay the problem elsewhere. I touched the desk's edge, nothing more. The card was mine. I said even. The autopay wasn't. Miss Ortiz nodded. What matters is the balance and the plan. She laid out fees and timelines without drama. If he brought a new funding source within 5 days... Heat pressed at the curb when we stepped outside. Damien rubbed his temple. I can't believe I let it get here, he said. I handed him a 1-page checklist I'd typed, remove my card from the portal, set AC from your checking, confirm routing and draft date, screenshot the confirmation, calendar the draft. At the bottom, another line. Friday budget session with Shannon, 9:30 a.m., Upper Kirby. I won't pay it for you, I said. I'll stand with you while you set it right. Friday morning, we met Shannon in a counseling room at the credit union with a whiteboard and a tidy stack of markers. She greeted Damien as a client, not a child. Categories went up: housing, utilities, food, transit, debt, health. Shannon asked him to read his numbers aloud, not because she doubted him, but because the ear teaches the mouth truth. He didn't look away. They trimmed re-ranked, crossed-out extras. A 60-day plan took shape: essentials. First, no luxury spend. Add side shifts. Hold the rest. At the end, Shannon slid a simple form across the table: autopay authorization for rent by ACH from Damien's account. He opened his phone and set the start date for the first business day. The screen asked for a memo name. He typed "My Responsibility" thumb, hovering before he pressed save. His shoulders dropped a fraction, as if the words were a small bench inside his chest. Shannon scheduled a check-in in 2 weeks. I put it in my calendar and kept my mouth out of his lane. Back home, I filed copies like a clerk who believes in order. The leasing plan went behind the past due notice, the ACH confirmation printed and stapled to the front. Shannon's session summary slipped into a new tab labeled Reality Budget. On a sticky note, I wrote "Replace by ACH 5 to 225" and laid it across past due like an honest bandage. The folder grew heavier, but not enough to bend the table. Weight can be structure when it is earned. I wrote the balance on a card by the stamps "Clarity should live reach, not drawer." Near dusk, my phone hummed. Damien sent a photo of his leasing portal, scheduled pending. No emojis, just the image. I typed back a word I had missed saying to him without complication. Good. A second message blinked from Darlie while I filled the kettle. I let it blink. Not everything needs my eyes. Systems were already speaking, and they speak more clearly than I do when provoked. On Saturday, I took the basil outside and divided it into 2 pots, pinching the tops so it would branch. The urge to fix everything with my hands is strongest when the house is quiet. I let the sun do the simple work I could not. Sunday morning, I put on a plain dress and walked to church. In the foyer, a neighbor's unguarded comment drifted by. I heard you're having a rough patch with the young ones, without malice, just the appetite of people who think stories are free. I smiled and spared no details, only a kind line. We're working it out. She nodded and moved toward the coffee urn. Mercy travels farther than gossip when you let it. I chose calm. Back at my table, I opened the folder and laid a finger on each tab one by one. Bank, removals, alerts, invoice, video stills, mediation memo, courtesy notice, leasing plan, ACH. The stack looked like a small, ordinary fort. There was no triumph in it, no show. Just the quiet fact that paper used, well, lets a person keep her name while others learn to keep their own. I closed the folder and breathed. The kettle clicked off. Outside, the basil held its shape small and upright. By evening, a final text from Damien arrived. Paid confirmed. I read it twice, not because I doubted, but because confirmed felt like water, finding its level. I set my phone face down and lifted my cup. I didn't need to announce anything to anyone. Systems had answered, and my work had been to let them. I let evenings stay ordinary and calm. The foyer breathed like a gentle bellows, warm air carrying coffee lilies and the faint starch of bulletins. Morning found me standing beside the side table, not hiding, not hosting, simply present. Light from stained glass scalloped across the tile and skirted my shoes. I told myself the same sentence I had used all week: worship, then home. No speeches, no rebuttals. If truth wanted a chair, I would pull one out and let it sit. Whispers travel on soft soles. Mrs. Lang leaned toward Mr. Everett and offered a verdict pitched to hover. Such a shame cutting off your own family. The words brushed my ear the way a paper edge can burn. I finished my breath. Then I turned. "Good morning," I said, smiling enough to be human, not enough to perform. "If you're speaking about me, I prefer to be present for it." Color rose, drained, returned. Mr. Everett shifted his program. Mrs. Lang's pearls clicked once against her cup. I kept my voice even. "I pay my bills. I will not pay for adults' luxuries. We put our agreement in writing this week. Truth does not argue. It stands." The pastor's administrative aide paused in the doorway, a kind witness to the small correction. "We have a peacemaking group if needed," she said. "Thank you," I answered. "Not today." The foyer hummed again, as foyers do when a small fire meets tile. Footsteps turned toward the sanctuary, and then Damien was beside me, hands in his pockets, hair not quite tamed, eyes clear the way they get after sleep. Finally wins. "Mom's telling the truth," he said, not loud, not timid, just enough. I used her card. "I won't anymore." A murmur shifted. Mr. Everett nodded once. Mrs. Lang's face softened into apology that did not need to become a speech. Damien went on. "We met with my leasing office. I set up ACH. I'm fixing my part. We found a bench beneath a framed hymn and sat close enough to share breath, far enough to let the words have room. I told Darley the posts come down," he said to the sheet music. "I won't play that game." I squeezed his shoulder once. "Good," I said. "That's a man's sentence." The word landed between us without smoke or confetti. A simple beam slid into place. He reached into his jacket and set a small velvet box on my palm. The graduation pen's box, not the pen itself. That was in my purse where it had been working all week. Inside the lid, the old card I had written years ago lay like a pressed leaf. He had saved it. "Keep the pen with you," he said, eyes still on the hymn. "I'll earn it back in practice, not speeches." I opened my purse, touched the cool clip, and felt the week settle around the gesture. "It was always yours," I said. "Today it works for both of us." I closed the velvet box and slid it beside the card in my folder when we rose. At home that afternoon, we brewed 2 mugs and put the mediation memorandum on the kitchen table like a map. Sun pooled on the oak the way it had on the credit union desk. Damien traced the initials at the bottom with a forefinger, then looked up. "Can I keep a copy I printed?" One wrote the date in the corner in the same steady hand I used for payroll a lifetime ago, and added, "Bring me a boring budget next month." He smiled for real. "I can do boring." Boring keeps roofs on. We talked about small things that are really large lunch from home, the difference between quiet and avoidance, how to leave a party before the bill becomes a stage. He asked if I was angry. "I was," I said. "Now I'm building." He nodded as if construction were permission. Before he left, he stood at the door and cleared his throat. "Mother's Day is next Sunday," he said. "Just you and me. Pancakes, coffee, no cameras." I laughed, the easy kind that makes time loosen its grip. "No champagne," I said. "No champagne," he agreed, relief and resolve braided tight. When the door closed, the house exhaled. I washed 2 mugs, dried them, and set 2 plain glasses beside the purse where the pen rested. Outside, a mockingbird practiced 3 melodies as if auditioning for a better sky. I thought of the foyer of truth arriving in shoes you could buy at any store, of a sentence spoken without ornament that had reshaped a week. I carried the folder to the table and tucked the velvet box into the pocket marked keepsakes. The memorandum lay on top, still smelling faintly of toner. I pressed my palm on it, not to hold it down, but to feel its cool, quiet weight. Boundaries once signed, do not shout. They hum under the day until decisions match them. Sunday light slid toward evening. I set the table for 2, not from hope, but from a plan that had learned to breathe. Next week, we would raise water, not sparkle, and speak words that cost nothing and paid everything back. And if anyone asked for a speech, I would offer only a chair for truth and let it sit. Before bed, I wrote 3 lines on a note card and did not give it to anyone. Proud of your sentence. Proud of your steps. See you Sunday. I slid it into the drawer with the rubber bands and spare stamps, a promise to myself to speak less and notice more. I sent Maureen a brief thank you, 10 words, and a scanned receipt, then watered the lilies from church until their throats shone. In the quiet, I rehearsed nothing. I let the house keep time, the ice maker clicking the kettle, settling the clock, agreeing. On the fridge, I taped a list. Keep it simple. Always Ma. I turned off the light and let Sunday be enough Mother's Day. Sunlight touched the old maple table as the skillet hissed. I set out 2 plain glasses and the engraved pen between them like a quiet witness. Coffee bloomed in the press. The house smelled like butter and something forgiven. A knock, then Damien's grin through the screen door, shy and early, a grocery bouquet held like a promise. HEB paper crackled as he eased it onto the counter. They were out of roses, he said, so I got whatever looked the most alive. Alive works, I answered, sliding stems into a jar. He reached for the batter bowl. I handed him the ladle. We moved around each other without choreography, just a practiced courtesy. 2 people can relearn when they stop bargaining with love. He flipped pancakes. I poured coffee. We spoke first about small things that carry real weight. His rent portal, now reading, scheduled my basil thriving on the sill, the forecast promising a blue afternoon for walking. His phone stayed in his pocket. Mine stayed face down. When the plates were set, silence rested with us like a third chair. I didn't rush it away. He didn't either. He cut a triangle of pancake and said, I told Shannon I'd come back in 2 weeks. We're naming the leaks before we patch them. I started a watercolor class, I said. Turns out, water obeys no one, but it can be guided. He smiled without looking heroic about it. Quiet competence suited him. We made room for the harder truth. 3 lines each like vows without the aisle, what hurt, what helped, what changes. I said I missed my son more than my money. He said I hid behind your money when I was scared to claim my life. We agreed on a standing Sunday call. Family, not finance. He reached for a glass. I reached for mine. Tap water caught a small square of sun and made it generous. He held his glass level and said, to the woman who kept her name and taught me to keep mine. It wasn't theater. It was a sentence built from the month we had just survived. To honest tables, I answered, and our glasses met with a sound so light it erased the pop of a cork I never asked to hear again. The toast landed where I needed it in the body, not the camera. We drank. Nothing sparkled but the day. Later, we walked the paved edge of Buffalo Bayou where dogs braided their leashes, and the skyline kept its distance. He told me he'd unsubscribed from the luxury delivery lists. It's strange, he said, how quiet a phone can be when you stop asking it to prove you exist. I told him I'd learned the same thing about silence at home. We crossed a footbridge and watched a heron choose stillness over flight. Next month, he said, I'll bring you a boring budget update. I like boring, I said. It keeps roofs on. Wind moved through the oaks and let us borrow its ease. Back at the bungalow, he checked the mail slot and laughed at the new order of my dish. By the door, certified receipts, a tiny watercolor brush, the pen resting where keys might go. That where it lives now, he asked. For ordinary days, I said, so it can sign ordinary mercies. He lifted the pen, then set it down the way one returns a tool after finally learning what it's for. Before he left, we wrote a short page together. Nothing legal, everything binding. If help is needed, ask with numbers and dates. If I can, I will say yes, precisely. If I can't, I will say no without apology. We both signed. His signature looked steadier than last week's. Mine felt like my own hand. On the porch, he said, same time next Sunday. Same time, I answered. Pancakes hold up well to repetition. He kissed my cheek, the same place champagne had stung. Water and time had done their work. So had paper. Evening light returned to the maple table. 2 clean glasses waited where morning had left them. I opened my ledger and wrote one line, Mother's Day, paid in truth. Then I closed the book and let the house be quiet. It is tempting to say the story ended at the toast, but stories like ours don't end. They turn. Mine has turned toward a woman who kept her name and a son who learned how to keep his. The accounts are separate. The affection is not. Boundaries, I've learned, are bridges with signs welcome on foot, no vehicles. I rinsed the glasses and left them upside down to dry. In the dish by the door, the pen waited beside the little brush, practical as rain. Tomorrow it might sign a check for the water bill or the receipt at the art store, or nothing at all. Either way, the ink is mine, and the piece, too. On the counter, the bouquet eased open. I thought about things that open when no one is filming Trust Breath, the courage to say no before resentment has to say it for you. I used to mistake endurance for love. Now I know love has posture, shoulders down spine, tall feet under your own center. I checked my phone not to hunt for trouble, just to honor the system I built. No pings, no banners asking me to fund a story. I archived an old folder named Emergencies and made a new one called Plans, the watercolor schedule, a library volunteer slot book club I kept declining. Before bed, I stood in the doorway of the room where Damien stacked cleats and late homework. The trophies still gathered dust on top shelf. I left them there and opened the window a crack to let the night into the past. In the kitchen, the pen caught a thin line of street lamp glow and let it go. I don't need to hold everything anymore. I only need to hold the line. I'm a mother who learned late that love and limits can share the same table. Keeping my name wasn't harsh, it was honest. If someone writes their story on your dime, you're allowed to close the ledger and still keep the door to decency open. That's my takeaway. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges with speed limits. Have you ever said no to protect your peace? What boundary do you wish you'd set sooner? Tell me where you're watching from, drop a 1 if this resonated, or share why it didn't and where you saw it. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one.